we already saw what JavaScript can do for us with some basic examples. The best one being that you click a button and you can change the inner HTML. Well, that is understood. But when your project grows, you need to organize your JavaScript. Now, in an HTML page, where should you put your JavaScript? That's the biggest question when you start with any JavaScript implementation. So there are multiple places where you can actually place your JavaScript. Like you can place your JavaScript in the head section, which is out here. You can also place it in the body section, which is again here. And you can also place it in an external file and then reuse that file from your HTML page. Now I'll show you on how to do this in all three approaches and which one's better and which one trumps the other. Simple example, we just had an on-click action or an event, and that updated the inner HTML of that particular p tag. This looks good, but now how do we implement this in our script example? So what happens is JavaScript is a scripting language for the HTML. Now, the way you define any JavaScript into your HTML page is using a script tag. Okay. Now, so which means that you can put in any script inside the script tag. For our example, we can put in this particular script into our script tag out here. And this is an event, which is an on-click event. However, this should work well, but when should you call this script? There has to be some kind of an indication. This script is just sitting alone. Now what we do is, in this scenario, for an event, you usually have something called as functions. Now we will cover later in detail on what a function or an event is, but just for the sake of this example, think of a function as a variable, let's say the way we do it in mathematics, right? Where you have x equals to something. Similarly, a function is just a block of code that gets executed when you call it, and it will have a name. So in our case, let's call it as my function, and we have a block of code. A block of code is always enclosed in a curly braces. Now let's put this into a function. Okay. Now we have our function defined, and we want to first try this out by placing it in the head tag. So let's place our script into the head tag. We have a function which can be addressed using this function name, and what this function will do is it will just replace the inner HTML. So let's try and replace this in the on click out here. Now if you note, the way I have defined a function is using some braces. If you see, there are two braces out here which identify a function. Similarly, when you call a function, you give those braces to indicate that that function is being called. So let's save this example and let's see quickly if it has any effect on our page. Let's get the page reloaded. Let's try and click and hope that the HTML gets replaced. Wow, it gets replaced. So now you have the script tag executed in your HTML page itself, and that too in the head section. Now just to give you a heads up, that script tag may have something called as a type attribute that describes that this is a particular type of a script. And in the previous years, or when the JavaScript was not the only scripting language, it was not the default scripting language, which means you had to, whenever you use a script tag, you need to define if it's a JavaScript or some other type of scripting language that you're using. However, now that with the world progressing and JavaScript being accepted, you no longer need to give this as a type. By default, it takes it as a JavaScript. Now, you saw the example where we put it in the head tag. Now let's try to put the same script tag into our body. So as you can see, the body tag gets completed here. I'll put the script tag in the body. Let's try to refresh the page and see what happens. And let's try it. Oh, the script works again. Now, which shows that it doesn't matter where you place your script tag, either in the head or in the body. So why can't you just put the script tags into an HTML? It's very difficult when you start putting in script tag across your HTML page. This HTML page is just like 3 lines. However, in real world, when you see an HTML page, it may have hundreds and thousands of lines. Now, if you start embedding scripts into the HTML page, it will get difficult to debug both your HTML and your JavaScript. So we have a third category where we can actually store this into an external file. So how can we do that? So let's quickly create a file called as MyScript and move this function into that file. I save this file. Now, in the same example, instead of calling the script tag with the function, I just say script source is equals to MyScript. Now, MyScript is the same file existing in the same location. And I'll call the same function. Now, the same function will be available to me in the because I imported the MyScript. Now, this source attribute can actually be very useful, where you can get the files either from a remote system, a cache, or probably a folder structure, where you can keep your files organized by modules. So let's see what happens in this scenario. Let's click the button and see if it works. Yes, it does work. So now we have removed the scripting from this page by just importing a file. And now you can keep on growing this file with various type of functions that you may need. Now let me come to the very important part on why and where we need to put a JavaScript so that it's easier for us to read as well as for the page to render. So what happens is, whenever an HTML page is rendered, there are few things that the render process. So when you start seeing the page, when you refresh a page, for the content to be visible, there are certain things that need to be loaded first. And for an HTML page to load, the page does not start rendering till the head section is completely loaded. So if you put your script, if in the head tag, and if your script file is, let's say, a big file of like 10 KB or 12 KB, it may hinder the progress of loading your page, and it may give the user a slow experience. So if you don't need a script tag to be loaded into the head section, or probably you don't need JavaScript while loading your page, you usually don't put the scripting in your head tag. You usually put the scripting in your body. So by this, you can definitely make sure that your page load speeds are taken care of. Again, that's something that you can consider while doing the performance. The advantages of having an external JavaScript is that it separates the HTML and your JavaScript code. It makes HTML and JavaScript easier to read and maintain. You can have cached JavaScript files, and that can speed up your page loads.